stickers, things of that nature.
Mr. Soley.
Thanks, Jomo. Chad, thanks for being here today and for a thorough and thought-provoking presentation. So Jomo just kind of brought up this idea of the, two parties, and you were talking about it, but I guess I want to be more direct about Alaska's constitution and our current system. We have oftentimes other parties on the general election ballot. So there's no prohibition to that. And if I'm being maybe pointed, I might say that the fact that Green parties or independence parties aren't winning the elections has nothing to do with their ability to legally have their candidates elected, but rather their inability to gather public support for their candidates. Some might recall the late Governor Hickel and his party. So we have a history of electing people from other parties, and I guess so maybe speak to the constitutional legal framework. And the fact is, we don't prohibit other parties. It's just that the Democrats and the Republicans tend to be the ones that bring people up, fund them, run them, and all that stuff.
And in fact, Governor Walker was independent-ish, was he not?
Yeah, Rick, Jomo, great points. Alaska's got a history of electing independents. We certainly have an independent streak. There's nothing necessarily prohibiting that. I think, Rick, to your point, I think it's true that some of these other parties, they might be smaller, but the reality is just not enough people agree with their platforms. And that's up to the party. The party can decide to go in a different direction and present stuff to the public that would garner more support, but they just haven't been able to do that. And but they've had an opportunity. I've certainly seen them on the general election ballot, and if they're able to get enough support, they get elected. So in some ways, I look at that as an argument that the constitutional structure that we have now, as it relates to these fundamental rights, is working at least in some capacity, in the sense that there are candidates that are beyond the scope of what you would consider to be the two major parties that get elected to statewide office.
If we could, Chad. So thank you very much for this presentation, by the way. I mean, very, very much. I had not heard that like ballot measures were exempted from certain portions of this. That's an amazing irony.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'd like to explore a little bit more what we're talking about as far as like how you get an R or a D or an I behind your name on the official ballot. You simply get to claim a party affiliation.
So Jomo, I think it starts there. As far as the actual technical process, it depends. The Division of Elections will certainly be able to explain how they expect to list them on the ballot. But that's my understanding from the reading, is that, contrary to the way it's been now with particularly the Republican primary, that you could have essentially self-designated multiple Republicans, self-designated multiple Democrats on an election ballot, and maybe only one of those out of that group is endorsed officially by the party on either side. So that's the way I understand it. And so yes, that's my answer there.
Yeah, I do have a problem with that. I mean, again, I believe that if you have chosen to freely associate with a certain group, that you all inside the club should have the choice of who's going to represent the club. Yeah.
And Jomo, so the dissent in Grange agrees with what you're saying. The majority in Grange basically said that as they think about this balancing test in life, the rights of the party and the rights to assembly versus the individual rights of the candidate to designate who they express themselves, who they think they should, and then the voters draw their own conclusion. The majority found that the candidate should be able to express themselves the way that they feel like they should. And then it's the obligation of the party to educate the voting population to say, hey, we don't believe what he believes. This is the person we've actually endorsed, and here's the reason why. And that's what they consider to be be kind of the balance as you think about our constitutional republic.
Okay, any further questions? All right, let's talk money. So again, academically, this is just Jomo Stewart talking. Academically, I do believe that there should be full disclosure about donations. That again, corporations are people, these associations are people. But that the voter should have be able to ascertain, having a clear understanding of who actually financed this, whatever is coming out of this group. That is the proper balance. Thoughts?
I think many agree, Jomo, and I also would add that I think the ballot initiative proponents should include themselves too. I don't think there should be special exceptions, and I think that's a big Achilles heel to this ballot measure too. And many believe that if they're able to carve out this exception, essentially, that we're going to see a lot more ballot initiatives, and the funding will not be clear to us, and Alaska, with a small population, small state, very humble in the grand scheme of things, when you compare us to the other states and what the state GDPs are for the other states, we're going to be used as a testing ground for many, many different things, whether it be, we're a natural resource development state, but other states may not see things the same way. That could be an effect with more experiments as relates to our constitutional provisions. A lot of issues out there. So I think that the fact that they exempted themselves and future ballot initiatives from that disclosure of where that money's coming from, it's a pretty big source. And I recommend everybody read that Community Perspective by Lauren Lehman, because I think he does a really good job of articulating why that's an issue, just from his former perspective as lieutenant governor and essentially the head of elections.
Yeah. Certainly, it seems on a practical basis, again, part of the reason we're where we are right now is the fact that money chases the loophole.
Yeah, that's right. And I think people are sympathetic that some feel like maybe it's too out of control now. And that's why there's, Citizens United, of course, was a 5-4 decision. So there's a lot of folks that disagree with some of its presumptions. I'd only point out that in some ways, if you watch the Supreme Court going back, from the 1860s when railroads were expanding and they started allowing constitutional rights on associations of people, corporations, as railroads expanded and went over multiple states post 1860, you'll see that the Citizens United decision, even though in the realm of political speech it was kind of dormant and restrictive for about 100 years, the other constitutional rights that were being bestowed on associations of people, corporations, the 4th Amendment, 14th Amendment, et cetera, in some ways, Citizens United and Hobby Lobby is a natural evolution based on precedent that's going back decades, where they just basically said that just because you choose to associate with a group of people a certain way, that does not mean you lose constitutional protections.
Okay. All right. Well, we got about 5 minutes left. We don't have to run it all the way out to the end of the hour. But I would like to open it up again one last time for any further questions. Okay. Well, again, Mr. Hutchison, thank you very much. This is very interesting stuff. Now, that debate that you had with Scott,
yes.
Where was that again? When and where was that?
That was Commonwealth North, and that was a couple weeks ago. And I'm not quite clear if that was recorded, but if it was, I think that it's a good, thorough debate, one way or the other. It's an interesting topic, to be honest with you. I really enjoy this stuff because I think that there could be a good, viable debate on all of it anyway. So it's in some ways it's a pleasure to talk about it. But Jim, thank you for inviting me. I really do appreciate it. And if anybody has any further questions, I can make myself available. My cell phone, I can give it out to people if they want it. It's 907-378-3946. Call anytime. I'd be happy to answer any questions about it. And other than that, I hope everybody has a good day.
Thank you, Chad.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Most gracious. All right. Well, and I tell you what, I will go look and see if I can find that Commonwealth North recording. Again, it's always interesting to see these as an active debate. Again, we try not to do that here. Again, we try not to have food fights in our boardroom. But again, it's neat to see the point and counterpoint inactive in real time. So I encourage everyone to go try to look at for that debate. Just a reminder for next week. Again, I'm really glad we had this presentation today. Next Tuesday, of course, is General Election Day. So everybody, we will not have a meeting next week. I encourage everyone to go out and vote. If you haven't done your early voting, I have not. I'm one of those silly people who really likes the tradition of it and actually going to the polling place. It's part of my heart. So yes, I encourage everyone to go vote. Again, we won't have a meeting next week. Just again, as a reminder, just know that again, the following week, rather than having our meeting on November 10th, we're going to have our meeting on November 9th. It will be a presentation from Doyon Utilities. Actually, less of a presentation by Doyon Utilities, but our guest will be Doyon Utilities, here to discuss the Fort Wainwright Power Plant DEIS. And later on that evening, there's actually going to be a public hearing on that DEIS. So we thought it would be good to go ahead and advance the meeting to Monday so that folks could actually have the discussion and kind of learn about the issue before walking into a public hearing rather than after. So again, please know that our next meeting will be Monday, November 9th at 8 a.m., where we will discuss the Fort Wainwright DEIS. All right, Jim, anything else?
Nope. Thanks again, Chad. Great. Your mom and dad would be proud of you. I'm going to call them and tell them.
I'll tell them you said hi, Jim.
I will.
See you, Jomo. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. And all right, everybody, have a great rest of your day, a great week, and a great election day next Tuesday. All right, bye.
Cool.